I hope you're ready to get hot and spicy, because you are going to Arrakis, and you aren't going for the sandworm stew. You're going for war. In a game of Dune, War for Arrakis, you and one friend will be warring for Arrakis. And the war will look very different depending on the side you choose to align yourself with. If you are the mean, nasty Harkonnen, you will win when the planet is finally engulfed in your sinister clutches. And if you decide to throw your lot in with the scrappy Atreides backed by the sandworm-taming, recycled water-swilling Fremen, you will win the game when it's kind of complicated, but you win the game when you've completed your spiritual journey in the desert and waged a successful jihad against the Harkonnen, and those are tracked by these 3 tokens. The core of the game revolves around action dice, because as the old adage goes, he who controls the spice controls the universe, but he who controls the spice must first control the dice. At least I'm pretty sure that's a thing. Each round of Dune War for Arrakis begins with the Harkonnen player distributing a collection of vehicles around the board, which they'll be using to vacuum up spice. After the Harkonnens have positioned their machines, both players roll a handful of dice, which will tell them what actions are available for them to take in the upcoming round. After everyone has sorted their action dice into their proper spaces on their respective player boards, adding in any Bene Gesserit token they might have, these count as wild dice results, you're off to the action phase. In the action phase, you and your opponent will take turns spending dice to take actions, with each action costing 1 die. Actions can be to move armies around the map, deploy more troops, launch attacks against your opponent, and play cards, which will do a host of different things, but mostly allow you to do those previously mentioned actions more efficiently, like move and attack in the same turn, for example. This dice spending mechanism will look very familiar to those of you who have played War of the Ring, done by the same designers behind this game, and I have nothing really to say about it other than it's fun and it's functional, and it creates a nifty little fog of war effect, where you don't really know what actions you're going to have available to you in the upcoming round until you've rolled those dice, and then you'll have to craft your strategy to accommodate whatever results you got. At the same time, you only rarely feel like you're being cornered into making a specific decision. Between what's going on the map and what you have in front of you and the cards that you have in your hand, you'll always have an assortment of options in front of you, each of them tantalizing. When the Harkonnen player has spent their last action die, you'll move out of the action phase and into the 3rd phase of the round, in which the Atreides player will uncork the bottle of desert horrors and spray its contents on any Harkonnen unfortunate enough to be out in the open. After those have been resolved, you'll move into a general upkeep phase where the Harkonnen will collect spice for every harvester they have left on the board, and then you'll start the next round. You'll keep this up until one side has completed their objective and won the war. Now that you've got a fairly good handle of the general structure of the game, let's take a closer look at each faction. Hello, you are the Harkonnens. The great houses are rabid for spice, and you are their sole supplier. Keep them satiated and they'll stay off your back. Fail to deliver, and they'll take their proverbial sledgehammer to your proverbial kneecaps, which is to say they will issue imperial bans against you, all of which will be different depending on the house you happen to disappoint, but terrible just the same. Now, this situation would be fine, drama notwithstanding, dandy, simple. But it's not, because you have problems, and most of those problems are called Fremen, but some of them, one in particular, are called Atreides. And for some reason, these people insist on being as tedious to live with as possible. To win as the Harkonnen, you have to earn 10 supremacy points. At the beginning of the game, you'll be able to buy those supremacy points with spice, but the majority of them will ultimately have to come from reducing Fremen settlements to rubble. Now, those Fremen settlements are called sieges, and in order to destroy a siege, you have to find the Sietch. And that means going out into the desert, where your soldiers will be tormented by Fremen and eaten by worms and brutalized by desert storms. It's a hassle. At the start of every round, you'll distribute a number of vehicles across the map. You've got harvesters, ornithopters, and carryalls. Ornithopters allow you to move armies at great speeds. Harvesters are giant Roombas that suck up spice, but are extremely vulnerable to both Fremen and sandworm attacks. Carryalls can rescue harvesters from sandworms, and you'll only ever have one, which seems strange. You'd think the Harkonnen would allocate more resources to saving their harvesters from giant worms, but whatever. You'll gain spice points for each harvester left on the board at the end of a round. And the farther into the desert that harvester happens to be, the more spice points it will bring you. And let me tell you, keeping the houses happy is expensive business. And trying to cheer them up after they're disgruntled with you is even more expensive business. So as the game goes on, you will have no option but to send your very vulnerable spice harvesters further and further afield. To be the Harkonnen is to feel powerful. At the beginning of the game, the board will be swarming with your soldiers. Beneath that feeling of power is panic. A panic that will mount as you slowly realize that no matter what you do, you will not be able to stop your empire from crumbling. There will come a day when, exhausted by tussles with the locals and angry letters from the great houses and skyrocketing death tolls, you'll soak in your black swampy bath like a slice of potato in a bubbling vat of vegetable oil, and think to yourself how easy life must be as a Fremen, making sand angels, huffing spice, frolicking amid the dunes without a care or worry in the world. Welcome to the Fremen Atreides side of the board, where you have nothing in the world but cares and worries. Unlike the Harkonnen, who have everything easy, instead of one token on your tracker, you have 3. And in order to win the game, you have to align the token's position on that tracker with the numbers indicated on your secret objective card, which you would have drawn at the beginning of the game. To do that, you'll need to achieve stepping stone objectives that will change every round and destroy Harkonnen settlements, all of which are heavily defended. And you'll need to do all of that with a fraction of the Harkonnen military might and a fraction of their action dice. The situation is more lopsided than a walrus sharing a tandem bike with a rock hyrax, and you aren't the walrus. But you've got a trick up your still suit sleeve. In fact, a whole bundle of tricks. And those tricks are called Desert Power. If on your turn you have fewer unspent action dice than House Harkonnen, you can choose to forego spending any dice at all and instead tap into your mystical connection with the powerful sandworms of Arrakis. At first, you'll lay down worm sign tokens. You can think of these as the thumpers you're using to attract the worms. And then when the worms show up, you'll be able to move them around the board and launch them at your enemies like giant floppy torpedoes. And that's not all. You can also use worm sign and the worms themselves to sand ride across the board, which is awesome and also renders you lethal as you're able to launch surprise attacks at tremendous distances. I also have to tell you how the worms show up because it's really great. At the end of the action phase, you will have a bunch of worm signs scattered around the board. You'll then add extra worm signs to every space where Harkonnen has an army out in the desert or a harvester. Once you've placed all of your tokens out, you'll flip them over, revealing one of 3 results. Either a worm, at which point a worm will burst through the ground, devouring any harvesters on that space or scattering Harkonnen troops there. You could also reveal a worm passing through the area. If you reveal this in the deep desert, a worm will appear. If it's closer to a populated area, the worm will remain underground. Or you could reveal nothing, and nothing happens. This part of the game is just really fun. The Atreides Fremen Alliance have other weapons in their arsenal, like the Desert Storms, which I've talked about. Those will damage any Harkonnen units out in the open. And the family atomics, which they can use to reduce the mountains surrounding the Harkonnen settlements to sand, so the worms can get through those mountain ranges and terrorize the Harkonnens behind them. Atreides also get access to my favorite character in the game, Paul Muad'Dib, who is so fun to play with and such a pain to play against. But that statement can be applied to either faction in the game, and that attests to how well they are balanced. At first, especially when you're playing Atreides, your imbalance detector will probably go haywire. At least mine did when I first played Atreides and saw the boiling pot of red pigment in the middle of the board. But I was thinking with my Atreides water power brain, and what I needed to be doing was, as the great Duke Atreides once said, harnessing the desert power. So I did, and within 2 hours I was butchering Sardaukar in the streets of Arrakis. Of course, you may get crushed by the Harkonnens too. It just depends on what decisions they're making, what decisions you're making, and how those come together. But regardless of what happens, everything will feel cinematic and undeniably epic. Your game might be a devastating tragedy where Paul Atreides and his friends are brutally cut down by legions of Harkonnen units, or it may be a breathtaking victory for the Atreides Fremen Alliance, where they blast open a pass to Arrakis and ride their sandworms through it. Either way, it will be cinematic and breathtaking, because that's what this design does. It takes whatever you do and makes it into a movie. The second Dune movie blew me away with its blistering action sequences and sweeping visuals, and every part of that movie that is splashy and glorious and fun to watch comes to life in this game. But the game also incorporates plot elements and characters from the novels, serving fans of the films and the novels alike. But there are a couple things about this game that made me grumpy, and I'm going to grump about them right now. The rules. Yes, this game is much more streamlined than its Tolkien counterpart. The combat, for example, flows so much faster, and that's really nice, but teaching it is still a marathon. And learning the rules isn't made any easier by the fact that the rulebook insists on incorporating a bundle of jargon to keep with the theme, and keeping your naibs and your bashars straight, even though they are functionally the same thing, is just a little tiring. The existence of a ton of rules is not all bad. More rules generally means a lot of theme, and I like theme, and the fact that this game has so many rules is one of the reasons why it's able to deliver such a spectacular experience. But it is a very large hurdle that anyone you're trying to play this with will have to clamber over in order to access the experience. But that's not the biggest hurdle with this game. No, that hurdle, I fear, is the price. This game is currently being sold for $140 American dollars, 150 of them after tax. That is a lot of money, and I mention that mainly to say that I don't think this game is worth breaking the bank over. It's good, it's really good, but it's not worth remortgaging your house or selling your soul to a bridge troll just to get your hands on a copy of it. That being said, if $150 is an amount you are perfectly comfortable with spending on a game, or if you're in the market for a luxurious treat for yourself, Dune: War for Arrakis is absolutely worthy of your consideration. One last thing, these miniatures are actually quite large, which is great. You get to see the details in their sculpts, and their weapons aren't nearly as bendy as weapons wielded by smaller miniatures, but sometimes they're a little hard to cram into a single space on the board, especially when we get into the Harkonnen area in the middle of the mountains. There have been several scenarios in which it's been difficult to tell which figure was placed in which area in the Harkonnen heartland, and for a game that is all about different numbers in different areas, that was a problem. That brings us to the end of our review of Dune: War for Arrakis, a box that will deliver to you a spectacular experience, arguably some of the highest highs of board gaming. It is a box chock full of spice, but boy, does it come at a price. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it informative. If you disagree with any of the things I brought up, feel free to type up your opinion and slot it into the comments. If you agree with anything I said, you can type that up too and put it into the comments. I'm sure people who visit the video would love to hear all about it. If you enjoyed the video, give us a like. That would be awesome. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.